All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our webinar about urban forest management. I'm joined today by Frances White, Jeremy Harold, Jesse Schuler, and Lauren Duran. I'm going to be serving as your moderator. My name is Karen Firehawk, so I'll be the man behind the curtain on the back end. You won't see me the rest of the webinar, but I will be also answering questions for anyone during this time. I'm going to actually turn it over now to Frances Waite to welcome everyone here.
Hi, welcome to our webinar on planning your urban forest. I'm Frances Waite, and I'm the South Carolina Forestry Commission's Urban and Community Forestry Program Coordinator. Our regional urban foresters and urban forestry specialists work to build capacity in city and county urban forest programs in South Carolina. And we also partner with the Green Infrastructure Center to deliver our urban forestry program in South Carolina. And I'd like to introduce Lauren Duran of the Green Infrastructure Center, who will be covering the topic of best practices for large cities to small towns on managing your urban forests. She will cover key processes, data, and strategies with what to consider when planning your community's forest. Lauren is a landscape architect and enjoys working with communities, local government, state agencies, and land trusts to help them locate and assess their natural resources. And Karen Firehawk of Green Infrastructure Center will be moderating the questions in chat. At the end of the webinar, you may raise your hand to ask questions, and you can put your questions in the box with the question mark on it during the presentation, and if she knows the answer, she'll answer it at that time or wait till the end. The intent of the webinar today is to discuss how urban forest management planning guidance can help more communities plan for their urban forests. And we're very lucky to have planner Jesse Schuler of South Carolina and arborist Jeremy Harold of Virginia to talk about how they are planning for urban forest in their communities and share their experiences. I also want to mention that the South Carolina Forestry Commission has technical assistance grants to help communities undertake this work in South Carolina, and Lauren's going to mention that at the end of her presentation, and I'd like to turn this over to Lauren now. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Frances, and welcome everyone to a guide to urban forest plans. This work has been sponsored by the South Carolina Forestry Commission with funds from the USDA Forest Service. And we are the Green Infrastructure Center, a nonprofit organization that works with communities to evaluate green assets and manage them to maximize economy, ecology, and culture. We create a lot of resources that are available for free on our website, and we have several guides and tools for urban forest planning, from storm planning through looking at codes and ordinances to planting a tree planting campaign. So go to our website and check out those free resources. Today, we're going to talk about what are urban forests and why do we need to manage them. We'll look at the types of urban forest plans out there. We'll talk about assessing your community's urban forestry program, the data that you want to have for urban forest plans, creating an urban forest plan, and then we'll look at two cases within a city or a town boundary. These can be single trees, street trees, land. It can be trees in parks, at schools, street trees, trees on residential and commercial properties. And these trees provide ecosystem services, from cleaning the air to sequestering carbon, lowering city temperatures, and regulating flooding. And as such, we really need to be managing these in the same way that we manage gray infrastructure. We know what we have, we catalog it, and we come up with management plans. We need to be doing the same for our green infrastructure. America's trees are in trouble. We're losing trees at alarming rates, and this has an economic cost. As these trees are lost, we lose those ecosystem services and benefits that they provide. There are also a lot of risks to the urban forest, from flooding, extreme heat and storm damage, to lack of funding for tree care and development in urban sprawl. So we really need to have plans in place. We need to be planning to manage the trees as our green infrastructure. In order for them to provide those benefits and ecosystem services, we need to keep the trees healthy. We need to be providing proactive care. And having a formal plan in place allows the city to plan for and allocate funding for tree care, tree maintenance, and tree planting. As we got into researching the different types of plans, we found there's some confusion. There's a lot of different names and types of plans out there. So for our purposes, we broke plans into 3 types. We have urban forest master plans, urban forest management plans, and small communities hybrid plans. So an urban forest master plan is really the foundational plan. We think this is probably where most communities should start. It's a vision and goals for the entire urban forest, all the trees, public and private. It's thinking about what do we have and what do we want? What do we see our urban canopy being in 10 to 20 years? And the actions that come out of this plan are going to include the city, nonprofits, and residents, so all the stakeholders across the community. The data that we want for this type of plan includes tree canopy assessment, looking at tree care and tree codes, potentially a tree equity analysis or community survey. And community engagement is a really key component of this type of plan. We want to capture all of the publics to represent the city's diversity. And then on this slide, I also am showing in our guide that we are giving, we'll give you the PDF for that. We have at the back this quick reference guide with the essential elements and recommended elements for this type of plan. And then an urban forest management plan is a little bit more of a specialized plan. So with this plan, we're thinking about how the urban forestry program will work toward that vision created in a master plan. So we're thinking about goals for tree care and planting of public trees in particular. And these plans tend to be of a shorter timeline, maybe 3 to 5 years. And the data that you really want to have in place for this type of plan is a tree inventory and an assessment of the urban forestry program. Community engagement in this type of plan might be more focused on stakeholders with particular knowledge and interest in tree care. And again, there's this list on the side here of the quick reference of the essential elements and recommended elements for this type of plan. And then as we continued and looked at different types of plans, we realized that some small communities are not going to create 2 different plans, and that there's the need to kind of have this hybrid plan where you take elements of both of these plans, maybe combine vision and goals with the tree guidance for those small communities. So there'd be a variable timeline with this. The data is going to depend on the data, and the community engagement would be dependent on kind of the focus of the plan. And then another element that came up in our research and then talking to communities is that communities weren't sure when they were ready to create a plan. So we created this tool. It's a self-assessment tool. It's available on our website at that link. You can download it there. And essentially you go through and answer a set of questions and you'll come out with a score at the end that will put your community into one of these categories from nascent to tree, with a nascent community being one that is just beginning an urban forestry program, while a tree community would have the most robust program in place. So as you go through this tool, you get a sense for what is the status of your urban forestry program, and the tool will also give you some idea of the best next steps for you to take for your community, and get a sense of if your community has the data to inform a plan and goals, and thinking about what your community's most urgent needs are. And will a plan help you meet those needs? So for example, if you identify that proactive tree care is the most urgent need in your community, a management plan will help you meet that need. If you identify that getting more trees planted on private property is your most urgent need, then a master plan and visioning process would be the plan that you would want to start with. And I'm just going to quickly go through data. We really want to encourage communities to have data to inform their plans. And so the data that you really want to have in place for an urban forest master plan is a tree canopy assessment, where you're looking at extent and percent of tree canopy, along with potential planting areas and planting spots. And conducting this analysis will give you a baseline so that you can analyze in the future whether what you're doing is having the impact that you hoped. So for this, we start with an image classification, break an aerial image down into different land cover classes, and then we create a tree canopy map from that. So get a sense for what is the percent tree canopy across the city, and then also what is the available open space for potential tree planting across the city. And then the data for an urban forest management plan that is probably most necessary is a tree inventory. So with a tree inventory, you're looking at diversity of trees and you can get a sense for if you're meeting goals like the 10-20-30 rule, where 10% of no more than 10% of a town's street trees should be of the same species, no more than 20% of the same genus, and no more than 30% of the same family. So thinking about whether you have the diversity to have a resilient tree canopy in your city if something like emerald ash borer or crepe myrtle bark scale starts to affect your street trees. In addition, as we were working on this project, the question came up, what order should we be doing things? So we came up with this framework sequence. So this is kind of a logical way to work through all of these goals and planning practices, but it's not the only way. Communities can come up with a different way. We heard about a particular community who they really needed to go through the visioning process to get funding to do a tree canopy assessment. So this is just a suggested framework where you start with the tree canopy assessment and setting canopy goals. You can then move into the master planning process. After that process, potentially getting a tree inventory of public trees that would inform a management plan. And then after establishing that management plan, maybe working on a risk assessment program, getting that in place, and doing some storm planning. So I'm now going to talk just a bit about creating a plan and all of the elements that go into creating a plan. So for this, I'm talking about all three of those types of plans, and kind of the elements might look a little different depending on which type of plan you are pursuing. So you want to start with all of them with a planning team, having 2 to 3 city staff that are plan leaders that are going to guide the planning process and keep momentum going. And those plan leaders will put together a team from city departments like city parks, public works, planning, engineering, maybe somebody from the city manager's office, emergency management, and GIS. And then also think about those other boards and commissions that you want to engage in the planning process. Next is the assessments. You really need to start with an understanding of the state of the urban forest. What are the existing conditions of both the actual urban forest and the urban forestry program? So these include the ecological or physical data that I talked about earlier, like tree canopy and tree inventory, maybe ecosystem services analysis. But it also includes the social assessments. So looking at tree equity across the city, public perception of trees, whether the city has advocacy or civic groups that are working for trees in the city, and then also governance data. So what is the city agency and leadership perception of trees? What are the codes and ordinances looking like? Is there a tree board? Is there funding for staff and maintenance? Additionally, stakeholders are going to be an important part of the process, so determining a stakeholder group depending on each type of plan. So for a master plan, you might have an advisory committee that includes city staff, as well as tree board members and advocacy groups and nonprofits, and then a public stakeholder group, which should reflect the diversity of the city. Whereas for a management plan, you might have an internal advisory committee of city staff and departments with a more tree-focused stakeholder group. And then a hybrid plan, you would figure that out depending on the plan objectives and scope. And just community engagement and public support, this is something that we heard from multiple perspectives, that this is one of the most important aspects of urban forest plans, that it's through the engagement and community work that support for trees is built, and that is what then translates into funding and action in the future. So If you're going to be hiring a consultant to do your urban forest management plan or master plan, make sure that you include community engagement in your project proposal. Engagement should have several approaches and levels of commitment, like surveys, public meetings, and committees, and education should always be included in the process. This helps build support for the plan and the implementation. The plans are all going to have vision, goals, and actions as well. So start with developing a vision for what a sustainable urban
All right, sorry about that. We seem to have some audio problems, but I'll go ahead and talk now. All right, so actions and objectives are really important to be specific, measurable, and provide a time frame for when you want to achieve your goals by. So, for example, instead of saying plant more trees, let's make sure that we say that we want to plant 500 trees over the next 5 years. And then implementation is usually over a 5-year period. Annual work plans and actions should be prioritized. It should also be assigned to responsible parties and make sure that there's funding in place. So, creating a plan, adaptive management and evaluation benchmarks. So, having benchmarks is really important. So, if you set a goal, say for planting 2,000 trees, how did you do? Did you plant 500, but you weren't able to get all the other trees in, etc. Having an implementation committee is also great because it especially can help not only track progress, but provide a little extra pressure if the city's falling behind. And then have your initial assessment serve as a baseline. And then think about systematic evaluations as sort of an adaptive management framework. So every 5 years, take a look at how you're doing with meeting your goals. And, ask is what we're doing getting us the results we wanted? Do we need to reevaluate this approach? Let's go to the next slide. So really important to also adopt the plan. We've actually heard from a number of cities and towns where they did not actually adopt the plan, and so then therefore did not implement it. So if you are going to require if your city council needs to adopt it to make it official or to justify putting money in the budget for it, make sure you include that adoption as part of the process. Next slide. All right, so this is our guide to urban forest plans. It has a lot more details than what we have time to present today, and also some case studies of some successful projects. And we've now invited 2 of our colleagues to present on their projects. So if you go to the next slide. All right. I also want to note that we do have funds in South Carolina if you're interested in mapping tree canopy, fixing forest codes, making your codes more robust, whether it's tree planting standards or penalties for removal of trees. Do you want to measure how hot your city is and make plans to prevent it using tree canopy? Do you want to plant more trees and engage the community in doing that? Would you like to actually create your own urban forest plan, or all of the above? Well, this is the good news, is that in South Carolina there are funds to provide the technical support to do this work. So if you go to the survey link below, You'll be able to do your application online. It is due by the 15th of December, and it actually only takes 20 minutes to complete the application. You just need to make sure that you are authorized to apply on behalf of your city, because if you're selected for all this support, then the next step will be to get a memorandum of understanding signed between you and us and the state. So just letting you know that there are funds available to do the work that we're talking about today. All right, so with that, go to the final slide. All right, I want to thank everyone for listening to the first presentation, and we're now going to move on to Jesse Schuler with the town of Summerville, South Carolina. And Jesse, I've just sent you the link to let you turn yourself on. Great.
Thank you, Karen. Can you see my screen?
Looks good. Great.
All right. So thank you. So the town of Summerville, we did receive a grant through the South Carolina Forestry Commission and the U.S. Forest Service to do an urban forest master plan this past year. And so we recently completed that this summer. And I'll just kind of briefly go through our plan. So our project team consisted of our staff members. We do have a tree protection board that is made up of citizen volunteers that are appointed by council. And then we hired the Davie Resource Group as a consultant on this project. So we did have a previous tree canopy assessment that was actually done by GIC back in 2015. And so we kind of used that as a comparison and looked at, so Summerville is experiencing a lot of growth as a lot of areas in the southeast, in addition to the changing weather and that sort of thing. So there's lots of reasons for us to look at an urban forest master plan. We are struggling with the balancing the natural assets of our town. We've always been kind of known for our trees and natural resources, but with the amount of development we're experiencing, we're having difficulty finding that balance, particularly with limited staff and resources. And so we felt that doing an urban forest master plan would be a good way to show what we had, what we're losing, and also where we need to make changes to correct that. So the vision we came up with through the master plan was the purposeful planting, protection, and care of Summerville trees will distinguish the town as a place of beauty, health, and vitality for residents and visitors. We used 2019 data for this because we did start this at the beginning of the year. We didn't have the most recent data yet, but based on that data, we have a 46% tree canopy coverage, which is about in line with a lot of areas throughout the region. But when you look at the tree canopy change between 2015 and 2019, that's where it becomes somewhat alarming, as we have a 11% loss in that amount of time, which is a pretty significant loss. And it is kind of throughout across all areas and land uses. So it's not, concentrated in just one area of town. It does, it's obviously more concentrated in some areas than others, but it does, you can see it is throughout all of our council districts, and across all the different land use types. Obviously, certain ones are experiencing greater loss than others. Residential, loss of 292 acres of tree canopy coverage. Commercial loss of 63%. Vacant land is being converted. So, I mean, those are the main ones where we're seeing those differences. Obviously, like I said, a lot of it is due to development and development pressures. As Lauren spoke about, trees do provide a lot of economic benefits and environmental benefits, cleaner air, carbon capture, stormwater capture. Stormwater is a big thing here in the Lowcountry, stored carbon. But what we found through the analysis is that we had basically an annual loss of equivalent to $4 million based on the loss of our tree canopy coverage. So not only was it a environmental loss, but also a pretty significant economic loss as well. Davie has basically a measurement that they use to determine where you rank in terms of your urban forestry program. They look at 32 different indicators. There's ones that deal with the trees, the community and stakeholders, and your actual management program. And as we suspected, we were low to moderate in all three sections. While the town has been known for our natural assets and trees for many years. That was actually why we were incorporated, was to protect trees way back in the 1847. But we've never necessarily put the money and staff towards that protection. And so it's honestly wasn't super surprising to us, but was good to have that shown that we are unfortunately in the low to moderate in pretty much all three categories. And also in comparison to similar towns and all cities and towns and similar towns with a similar population to us, as you can see, we only spend $4.16 per capita on trees, whereas almost twice as much is spent by other towns. So something we definitely need to address. Also, in terms of staff, we have almost a third of the staff that other towns with similar populations have. So it makes it very difficult to manage the trees, not just the public trees, but also development and private trees in the town. As Lauren mentioned, we did obviously include public input as a part of this process, as it's a very important part of the master plan. And we found that that the public does fully support and agree that trees are a very important part of Somerville. They agree that we should work to try and save public trees, and also most people agreed we should try and save private trees as well. So the majority of folks also agreed that the town government should pay for trees on public land. Our survey was out for about a month. It was an online survey. We had about 500 responses, which we felt was pretty good response rate. So we also did some stakeholder interviews with stakeholders and got some similar input. But based on all of that information, we were able to, Davie provided 8 main recommendations for the town. The first is to regularly update the urban tree canopy assessment. This is helps us kind of see where we are in relation to our urban canopy. The next target year for that would be 2026. So basically trying to do that about every 5 years or so, 5 or 6 years. The next recommendation was to complete a comprehensive tree inventory of all right-of-way and park trees. We have a small inventory in some of our parks, but overall we don't have a public tree inventory available to us, which means we can't really do a full management plan for our public trees because we don't know where they are. So that's something we need to look at trying to find funding for in the next few years. We need to grow the town's urban forestry program to match the desired level of service. So that may include hiring additional staff, actually establishing a line item from urban forestry in the town budget, annually report on urban forest activities, and actually formalizing an urban forestry department for the town. Right now, we have an arborist who is under the planning department. And then we also have our Parks and Rec department that has a couple of staff that handle tree public tree care part-time, which is mainly just pruning or taking down dead trees on a reactive basis, not a proactive basis. So we would definitely like to try and become more proactive with our management of public trees. We are recommended to develop an urban forest management plan for the town's public trees. As I mentioned previously, we do need to have that tree inventory first before we can actually do that. But once we get that tree inventory, we would like to develop that management plan to be able to establish a pruning cycle and prepare for threats and emergencies, and also storm response as well. Since we're close to the coast, hurricanes are something we do deal with on a somewhat regular basis as well. We need to integrate urban forestry planning and resources into a parks and recreation master plan. So working with our parks department, trying to coordinate that together to look at maybe acquiring additional natural areas to save that canopy, and invest in parks and trails to help also build equity by providing canopy in different areas throughout the town, particularly those that may be underserved currently with that. Leverage public and stakeholder support for trees to advance funding and partnerships for urban forestry. As I mentioned, our survey and our stakeholder groups showed that there is good public support for trees and funding for trees. So we need to take advantage of that by right now our tree protection board mainly reviews removal of grand trees in development projects and that sort of thing. So we'd like to try and expand the duties of that board to also include some advocacy and education for trees. Look at creating some volunteer programs, maybe adopt a tree programs, that type of thing, and looking to other groups that maybe could support tree planting care and public outreach in the town. We need to refine existing tree protection policies for private residential property and development. Currently, we do have some differentiation between different zoning districts and land uses, but we need to look at differentiating that further and customizing our tree protections. We also need to look at possibly expanding our mitigation fees basing on tree appraisal. Right now, it's basically just based on the inches required to replace a tree, and so a lot of developers look at that cost and are like, oh, I'll just get rid of the tree. There's no need to try and design around it. I can just pay to replace the inches. Whereas if maybe if we change that to be based on tree appraisal, where you're actually looking at the value of that tree, developers would be much more willing to look at designing and keeping trees in mind rather than seeing what they can fit before looking at trees. We also have a tree fund in place but currently it's only allowed to be used to plant trees on public property. So one of the recommendations is to look at trying to make that more flexible to be able to use for management of public trees, and also potentially some other planning and that type of thing for tree planting. And then also we have a design review board in addition to our tree protection board. And unfortunately right now they don't really work together. And so you have some lack of coordination between those two boards that definitely needs to be addressed as well. And then the final recommendation was to establish a program to prioritize tree planting in the town in locations that advance town sustainability and equity goals. And Davey did create a map for us that prioritizes those tree planting areas. And we are already looking at that to find those areas. And we're actually scheduling our Arbor Day celebration to focus in one of those areas to do some planting there. So we need to continue to look at that and focus on those areas that are high priority for stormwater management, equity, economic development, and work to get more canopy in place. We don't think it's realistic to try and increase our canopy at this time. Right now, we are really just trying to stop the loss and then hopefully get to where we can at least be at a no net loss of tree canopy. So as I said, with implementation, right now we are starting with items that don't require significant funding, as we are in a mid-budget, so we don't really have the ability to ask for additional funding at this time. So we're starting with those, such as the tree planting and trying to coordinate and get that public support to try and work with that and then we'll consider the items that require more significant funding during the next budget planning, which would start in April of next year. And then we're also currently working closely with our tree protection board, as I mentioned earlier, to try and expand their duties. So working with them to identify those highest priority areas for tree planting, to try and start organizing a coalition to support tree planting and care, and looking at the possibility of adopt a tree program consideration, because we don't currently have the staff to support the care for our public trees. Maybe looking at, when we do public tree planting, some type of adopt a tree program where folks could, take care of those trees in the first couple of years of life specifically. In terms of lessons learned throughout our process, one of the things we found was very important is understanding our existing processes, our policies, staffing, and financing. You really need to know where you are and be realistic with where you are in order to understand what you need to do and where you need to be. We realized, we do need to make better use of our existing boards and commissions and consider expanded duties there. So it doesn't necessarily always mean you have to come up with a new committee or a new commission. You may be able to utilize an existing one that you have. As Lauren and Karen both mentioned, you need to make sure that you set realistic and actionable goals. Like I said, there's really, it's unfeasible for us to try and increase our canopy right now, but we would like to definitely try and stop the loss. And just understanding that the Urban Forestry Master Plan is kind of the beginning of the process. It's a roadmap for your future forestry program, and hopefully it's something that we will be able to build off of in the future. And so that's all I have. So I will turn it back to either Karen or Lauren.
Great. Thank you so much, Jesse. And now we are going to turn it over to Jeremy Harold. He is the Green Space Manager for the City of Harrisonburg, and he is going to talk to us about Harrisonburg's urban forestry program and planning. Welcome, Jeremy.
Yeah, good afternoon. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
All right. Yeah, good afternoon. My name is Jeremy Harold. I'm with the City of Harrisonburg, and I've been with the city since 2004. And instead of diving too far into our plan, kind of like Jesse hit on a lot of great stuff, I was going to kind of tell the story of how it took a decade or so to get to creating the plan, and then some things that helped catapult our urban forestry program into the next phase. So with that, 2009 took about 5 years for me in park maintenance and trying to get some kind of program established. And I found out about emerald ash borer in 2009 at a seminar similar to this, and knew we were in big trouble. And Harrisonburg Park System, we are a college town and right along Interstate 81 in the Shenandoah Valley, and surrounding counties are a lot of agriculture and not much forest industry. So we have a lot of development and not a lot of focus on our park system or our public trees in Harrisonburg until this point. So I knew we were in big trouble in our park system. We had hundreds of mature ash trees in our park system that I knew that were going to have to be removed in the future. And you can see in this map in 2009, EAB had just started to reach into Northern Virginia. So I came back and I created this proposal, and I gave it to my director, and he gave it back the next day, and he said, thanks, you hold on to this, put it on the shelf, you might need it one day. And we did. It took another 5 to 10 years for emerald ash borer to finally get here in 2017. At that point, we found our first adult in one of our parks, but at that time, our former director had retired, and we had a brand new parks director and a brand new city manager. So that's what really I'd like to share, that sometimes it takes leadership change to hear you out and to get the ball rolling, to get the support from City Hall all the way down through directors to get a program started. Um, we're in the Chesapeake Bay watershed here in Virginia and Harrisonburg, so we did get started. A lot of our program is solely the foundation of our program is through our stormwater. We have requirements here in Harrisonburg with an impaired stream that runs to the Chesapeake Bay, and in 2017 we were finally able to tie together credits for planting trees along our streets and urban spaces to help clean our stormwater. So this was a big step forward for our Public Works Department. And then big credit to our Virginia Department of Forestry, and they saw that we needed a little extra help, and they introduced us at that time to Karen and GIC, and our plan was put together in 2018 and 2019, and this really helped get things going further. And again, they showed this is the map that they supplied us with potential planting areas, and I've been using this a lot over the last 5 years. And these are recommendations that we got from our plan from GIC, and I'd just like to highlight that we've really accomplished everything in red, and we're moving forward with that now. And so here's 2017. This is what we were approached against. And at that time, I was able to move from Parks and Rec over to Public Works to focus on this solely. So it may take is your program more suited in Public Works or Parks Department? Is something that you kind of need to figure out. This is one of our larger parks in the city of Harrisonburg, the recreation center and swimming pool, skate park, and disc golf course. And all the green dots you see here, over 600 ash trees on this hillside that we need to do something with, and we really don't have a plan to do anything with. So this was really what catapulted us into our program, and taking something, a bad situation, and taking that and creating a great program out of it. So moving to Public Works, I was able to again partner with Virginia Department of Forestry in one of their grants, and we contracted out our management plan. I saw a quote from Rachel, and Rachel and Jenny did an awesome job at Urban Canopy Works, and we put together our management plan. We actually used, this was a 50% match grant, so we used our time, our staff time, to conduct an inventory of our public trees and help to pay for the plan. So if you're looking, if you don't have a budget and you want to try to do this, and the state of South Carolina or whatever state you're in, look out. There's lots of grants that you can in-kind match to staff time to help pay for this stuff. So again, this is recommendations we got from our plan. A lot of the same things you see pop up here again. Our goal, our tree canopy was at 26%, which is kind of national average, but below average here in our area. So, but we've lost 1,500 ash trees in our community. So our goal right now is just to plant 1 for 1 back of every ash tree we've lost, and to continue to build the program with outreach. We were just able, with this plan, we were just recently hiring a brand new technician to grow our staff. And again, our urban wood program, I'll share a little bit about that here in a few slides. So that's what we've got going on in Harrisonburg. 2 plans really helped get our program going. There was another study just in 2021. There's a heat island study in the state of Virginia. We were selected to be one of 10 locations in the state of Virginia. There's students at the local college. They monitored temperatures morning, evening, and afternoon in the city for the entire month of July. And these are maps we got back also. So we're able to use our GIS and overlay our potential planting maps with the heat study maps, and really hone in on where we need to plant trees in the city. And we've really been focusing on our elementary schools to get kids out. This project also came along $10,000 for free trees to plant in hotspots. So we used that money at one of our elementary schools to plant over 100 trees and to get kids out, and everybody got to participate and help plant a tree. And this project is actually cycled into its second season, so we're looking at getting about another 100 trees out this spring. So lots going on in Harrisonburg. We just continue to grow and being, just thank you to be invited to seminars like this to spread the word. But you can also catapult your program even higher and expand your portfolio. We created an urban wood program. This is a big initiative in the state of Virginia to create an urban wood program. I learned more about this in 2017 through the state of Virginia Department of Forestry, and we really focus on urban wood utilization. And when that whole ash tree has to come down, we use every bit of that ash tree from the top branches to mulch to the larger branches. We have a firewood program, but then the biggest story out of this is to take that trunk and to upscale that trunk into something more useful and something that can sequester the carbon and be with us for a long time. So we got the community involved, and it was a good way to do with Harrisonburg Downtown Renaissance Project. The director needed a new conference table. We went out, we removed the ash tree from our golf course, and we made lumber. And at a local sawmill, the tree barely left the city. And then a crafter made these beautiful tables for our downtown Renaissance oaks. And we even took a picture of the tree before it came down and framed it in memory to honor that tree before it came down. So this is a good way if you're losing trees due to development or other city projects or invasive species, then an urban wood program can really highlight your urban forestry program to get everybody involved. Trees have to come down, and then we can plant more trees back. Even local contractors now have created a new company here at this city projects downtown, some benches around downtown just to get the word out. And then again, back to those 600 trees that came out of the park, we had to basically use a federal wildlife and fisheries grant to log that whole hillside. And a lot of those wood chips went into a bioreactor project in one of our parks. This is wood chips that are buried in a system. It's a passive system where the stormwater, the stream that runs through one of our parks actually flows through, and the nitrates latch on to the wood chips and help clean the water as it travels to the Chesapeake Bay. And this project actually won a gold medal award, Governor's Gold Medal Award. So this created a lot of attention for our program too. And then get into your local universities and share what urban wood is with students. These are architect design students, industrial design students, create projects back into the Arboretum where trees had to come down. And it's just a whole circle tree project. Tree was standing, was a hazard tree, came down and then turned into lumber, and it was put back into the Arboretum as a project, Reading Roost. And the trees that have to come down can go into elementary school projects as a nature trail. So it's just a whole host of things you can do and be creative with your urban forestry program, urban wood program. The Virginia Department of Forestry and Trees Virginia has created this urban wood directory that businesses can upload their business, and it's just a network of folks from the state that promoting the urban wood movement. With that, I'll wrap up. A lot of this we got in. We were very successful. Timing was right as we were starting our program, where we got a lot of language in our. We were redoing, revising our comprehensive plan in 2018, and we've got language in there. And then we created a brand new environmental action plan in 2019, and we were able to get initiatives and goals in that plan as well. So again, that's a lot going on in Harrisonburg, and I will turn that back over now.
Great. Thank you so much, Jeremy and Jesse, for sharing your experiences in your towns. And I guess now we'll open it up for questions. Karen, are there any questions currently?
So far, I don't have any questions that are newly asked. If anyone would like to ask a question, you can simply put it in the question panel and type in your question. You can also use the raised hand feature. I don't see anyone with a raised hand at this time. So if anyone would like to ask a question, Emily Jones, she is ready. So let me just go to Emily. All right. And I'll ask you to unmute Emily and you can ask your question aloud.
Hi, thank you. I was trying to type. Here's my question. Can you hear me?
Emily, we're having trouble hearing you. Can you speak a little louder or closer to your microphone?
Okay, can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
No, we're having trouble hearing you. Do you think you could type your question into the question panel or into the chat?
Yes.
Okay, so we could not hear Emily, so we've asked her to type her question into the question panel. Does anybody else have a question that they'd like to ask with a raised hand? Okay, I don't see any other hands coming up. I'll check the question panel. All right, I'll read out one question that George asked earlier. He was from New York and he wanted to know if there was something specific to South Carolina that makes it easier or harder to encourage or regulate trees on private property. Enforcement is always a big issue as well. You have tree inspectors. So I answered him that South Carolina generally has strong tree ordinances and often arborists on staff that can visit sites where tree removal has been requested. So one of the advantages of having a requirement for a permit to remove a tree and then having someone to come out is you can often, even if the tree is, rotten and needs to come down, that's one thing. But a lot of times people want to take down a healthy tree. But if you visit them and point out the benefits that tree is providing, you can often get them to agree to keep the tree or at least to maybe just remove the one limb that's a problem instead of the whole tree. Jesse, I wonder if you would like to comment on enforcement and how that's gone for your town or how you deal with that in terms of people cutting down trees.
Sure, thank you, Karen. So it is, it can be an issue, but generally, as I said, Somerville was actually incorporated by a tree protection ordinance, was the first ordinance we had in place. And so it's kind of generally well known that we have a pretty strong tree protection ordinance. Right now, we do only have one arborist on staff, and so that's one thing that does make it a little difficult, in that we do get a pretty significant number of tree removal requests, just because we're a town of over 50,000 people. So having one person to handle all of those does make it difficult for him to actually have time to do any public tree management or other sorts of things. So while it is good in that, like you said, sometimes he can convince people to keep trees, or at least, let them know that it really, there's really no hazard with the tree they want to remove, and that type of thing. And it does take a significant amount of staff time and effort to do those tree inspections. And then, of course, we do have folks who still remove them, even if they've been told no, or that sort of thing. So that's a whole nother enforcement issue, but it is something that is important to the town, but it does take a lot of time, staff time and effort.
Sure, and thanks for pointing that out. It's not easy to do. And then next question, if the GIC imaging work is used as a baseline, how quickly might a tree canopy change show up? So generally, we recommend waiting 5 years apart, so that if you had smaller trees that didn't show up because they were just really young and weren't big enough to be a canopy, if you wait 5 years, that'll be enough time for that tree to show up. It'll also be enough time to start to notice loss, if trees are coming out. Okay. Another question was, Rick Roth had a question for Jeremy. What species of trees are used to replace the ash trees in Harrisonburg that were lost?
Yeah, we're going by the 10, 20, 30 rule is also, you know, trying to plant less than 10% of anything to get rid of that monoculture. We also have a great pollinator program, so we are planting a lot of trees in our medians and right of ways for pollinator corridor. So anything that we can, we can kind of a mix of well-backed mix that pollinator-friendly trees too. So we want those large canopy trees significantly, up first, but then we're trying to get some natives mixed in too, or all natives mixed in. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jeremy. All right, the next question is, and anyone can answer this. What role should local tree care companies play in an urban forestry management plan? So if you're a local arborist company or a local tree care company, what's your role in the plan? Jeremy or Jesse, do you want to try that?
Yeah,
Um,
we're fortunate that we have a couple great arborists in our community, but we also have some good staff too. So a lot of our removals are all through city staff at Public Works, but then we also contract out some things that we can't get to. We even we treated 36 ash trees on 2 cycles, so we do some plant health care also. So it's just finding a good arborist company that you can work with throughout the year.
Okay. And Jesse,
uh,
did you have a?
yeah, I was just going to touch on that's one thing we're hoping to maybe look at in maybe partnering with some tree care companies to provide some educational opportunities, or working with them to, help with planting that, try and get them more involved in the actual, um, you know, public outreach about trees, so that, because I think obviously most people who remove trees are using a tree care company or something like that. So if the tree care companies understand the ethic of the town, and the, trying to plant more trees and keep trees when they don't need to remove, that type of thing, I feel like they can also provide that type of education, so it's not always having to be staff or someone like that who has to do that. So hopefully maybe reaching out to some of those companies, and trying to get more of a, not necessarily a partnership, but at least coordination where there's that understanding, so that they're also maybe fighting for the trees, and rather than, and there are ones that certainly do that, but then there's others that are more of tree removal companies, and maybe trying to get them to swing less towards the removal and more towards the actual tree care and management. So.
Okay, great. We have next a question from Kendall Topping. So just a second, let me scroll to her name. All right, Kendall, I'm going to ask you to unmute now.
Thanks. This is an odd specific question, but I've noticed particularly in Virginia, we're having a lot of issues with companies going door to door offering to top trees, and it's causing a lot of neighborhoods to lose canopy. Is there any way you guys have had experience combating this myth, or making regulations to forbid topping, or what are some of your recommendations for combating this malpractice?
I'll just speak real quick. We do have, in our tree ordinance, we do prohibit severe pruning, which includes topping of trees. So folks can be fined and cited for doing that. I think also, public education would be a key part of trying to combat that as well. Um, most of the folks that we see complain about topping, is it generally has to do with electrical lines, and the uh, electric company doing that, which unfortunately is a different issue in trying to work with them, because they have requirements they have to meet for separation of lines from trees and that sort of thing. But we do have a specific prohibition in our ordinance for severe pruning, and basically not just topping, but pruning of, lollipopping, line tailing, that type of stuff as well. That is generally more than 20% of the tree's canopy. If that's pruned, that is a violation of our ordinance.
Okay, thank you. We had one last question that's about all we have time for. What approach do you take with developers? Assume they would have to remove a lot of trees in order to develop. So any quick tips on dealing with developers?
I guess that's me again, since Jeremy's more in the Public Works Department. So we do have a process that starts with our technical review committee, where they have to show, existing a tree survey is a part of their very beginning of the process, and try and work with them to take the trees into account and have, particularly if there's grand trees on the property, which for the town of Somerville is anything 16-inch DVH or greater. They have to have those trees not only surveyed, but evaluated by a certified arborist. And those trees that are generally rated, most of the arborists in our area use a A to F scale, but those that are rated A or B, we generally require you to work around those. Obviously, there's times when that's not possible for all of them. That's when mitigation comes into play. But generally, if you're trying to remove A or B rated grand trees, you do have to go before a tree protection board for review and approval. But we do understand that trees do have to be removed for development, so we try and focus on those highest quality trees and grouping of trees that you can save, rather than just one single individual tree, because generally when the trees grow in a forest setting, trying to save one tree is not usually very viable. But if you can save a grouping of quality trees, that's what we try to look for, is trying to save groupings of trees where possible. But then again, we do get accused of not being as strict on developers as we are on existing homeowners. So that's something we are planning to look at our ordinances again and see if there's changes we can make, like I said, about changing that mitigation fee to the appraisal of the tree rather than just the inch by inch mitigation. So.
Okay, thank you very much, Jesse. With that, we'll end this webinar. Thank you very much to Lauren, Jesse, and Jeremy. And with that, we will also be sending everyone a copy of the slide deck and a copy of the recording. And I hope you all have a great day. Get out there and enjoy your trees. Thanks.